The Rakali is an Australian water rat, and I had a request from Sonny. He wanted a lure, a rat or a lizard, no longer than 150 mil, plus the tail, and it had to be a paddler. So here I am drawing out my rat design and just using the skills that I've gained over the years of lure making to have a think about where the best placement of joint would be, how I tuck in the legs and the front and back legs and the ears so then they don't stick out, potentially to be snapped off with some pretty poor casting. So the drawing up of where I think these bits and pieces should be is partly a pretty big job. This one's a little bit different. You can see what I'm doing here in the drawing. I'm thinking about the best placement for some rattles. So I've got some internal rattles going into this lure for something different. It's a timber lure, and having rattles inside something a little bit special. Jelutong is the wood that I've picked out for this lure. It's great carving ability and buoyancy, makes it great for paddlers, particularly from paddlers with details. So I've drawn it onto my block of Jelutong, and now I'm hitting the bandsaw and cutting out the lure. There's a fair bit of cutting to go in this clip, and you see, trying to get my hands away from that very sharp bandsaw blade, cutting it around. And there's a section in a part in here where you see me stuff up, and just about now is where I'm just checking where I want the joint to go, and this is where I make a fatal mistake, where I cut all the way through the joint. Not the smartest thing to do when lure making, so it's out with the double-sided tape, and I've glued it back together, and you'll see why it just makes carving a whole lot easier as we progress the build. So now I'm just going back and looking for a center line in the lure, making sure that I can get the mouse as symmetrical, or the rat, sorry, as symmetrical as possible, and getting the center line is where I start, and then I'll jet all the way through, chamfer lines going on, and it's these sorts of details that make the lure that little bit better and more special when it comes to the end result. Now it's onto the belt sander, the disc sander, and just cleaning up the edges, trying to get a little bit of a rounded look, using what I can. In this case is the disc sanders getting a little bit of a workout. So this lure, 150 mil buoyant paddler, and I'm just preparing as much as I can to get it as smooth as I can before I start actually carving away at making it even more like the rat that I needed to turn it into. So these rats are pretty special Australian species, something you do see out on the Aussie rivers and streams and even lakes from time to time. Now I'm just going back to my original drawing, ensuring that I've got it where I need it to be, as close as possible to that 150 mil, and making sure I've got still enough timber on there to keep it nice and buoyant. So when we do put a paddler bib on it, it's going to give it a really nice action. Again, just going through, checking the chamfer lines of what I'm going to knock out and roughly drawing them out by hand. This is really a lure that's one-off, so it's not something I'm doing in mass production. As you can see, this is the only one I'm making at this time. So I really like to just sort of freestyle, use my eye and my hands, and just the feel of what I remember the Rakali to be like, and doing my very best to get it as close as possible. Okay, most lure carvers' favourite time, it's the actual carving. It's taken us a bit to get here, but yeah, I prefer to carve these days with my trusty Stanley knife. It's I think it's a carpet laying Stanley knife, so it's just a bit bigger grip and everything, so you get a bit more control out of that blade. The Jelutong carves really, really well. It's like one of the best timbers I've used to carve with, and around equal up with the buoyancy. It just makes working with this timber a bit of a dream. This happens to be my last piece of Jelutong, so I'll be putting an order in very soon to hopefully get some more. I'm just speeding up the carving now, Obviously I'm not carving this quickly. And just really working on the details, thinking about the profile of the rats that I've seen, and just knocking off the edges as much as I possibly can without taking too much buoyancy out of this lure. Particularly in the back of my mind is those rattle chambers that I'll be installing in as well, and where they're going to go and what position they're going to be in, and make sure that I've got enough timber around that extra weight that I may be adding through a rattle chamber, and 2 rattle chambers, 1 in each section as we move along. So carving lures isn't that difficult once you get the hang of it, and obviously you can't put back on material that you take off. So just be really mindful, take off small bits at a time, ensure that you're working with the best possible timber you can to do the job you want to do, and keep those fingers well away from anything sharp that you happen to be carving with. I use a variety of tools, which you'll see over the vid, but the Stanley knife definitely is. If there's any new lure makers out there that really want to get into making some cool designed hand carved lures, the Stanley knife is probably your best port of call. I've got every carving tool probably known to man, and yet the Stanley knife is something that I keep continually coming back with. You can see I've just taken apart the glue in that area. That's why I glued it back together, just to keep the consistency during the carve. And you'll see it's coming apart in my hands now because I just used that double-sided tape that's sitting on the bench to put it together. So I'm sort of done with having it together anyway. So now you can just see me carving one piece at a time and making sure that I get as many of those edges off and try and add in as much detail as I possibly can at this stage with the knife. It does take a while, as you can see, but ensuring that you've got every detail covered, and I'm always referring back to my drawing to make sure I know where I want the ears to go, how much material I'm leaving for the nose and the facial features, and even the general way I need the face to face. Also got the sort of degree of bib cut out into the nose of this lure currently. That makes a huge difference on how the paddler performs, and depending on how you like your paddlers running through the water. Some people like them to move a whole heap of water. Some people like to work lures quickly so they can sort of skim across the top and just disturb the top, and that all comes down to the size of the paddler bib that you're going to put on, but also the size, the angle of the way you install that paddler bib. Here I'm just checking some details, putting the nose on the rat the way I want it to be, and placing the eyes in the places where I think the eyes should be, making sure that I'm trying to keep it as symmetrical as possible by eye. And sometimes I'll use calipers and things like that to help get that symmetry spot on, but because I'm pretty much freestyling this whole lure, I'm just going by my eye, and I know this design works well. I've used it before, this rat sort of design, so I know that I'm pretty much on a good wicket, a good path, and this lure should swim pretty good. Right now I'm just cutting the legs out to make sure I get them on in a symmetrical way. Speeding the clip up now. I can't work this fast, I wish I could, but again, just getting all the symmetry right with the legs, getting them drawn out and preparing to carve in the detail by hand. Again, a bit of a tedious process, but it's all part of the lure coming together to look the way it does in the end. So a bit more carving as we go through. Again, I'm just making sure I've got those facial features down pat. You can see the nose is really starting to pop out now, and I'm starting to see a bit more of that sort of rat face detail, particularly with the ears. Carving this detail is probably my favourite thing to do. It's when the lure really starts coming to life, especially when you're making something realistic like this rat. Now I'm going to go into the back end Again, carving away material, moving into the hind legs, getting around, just getting a general shape, because I do want to still drill some holes shortly to put in the rattles, the internal rattle chambers. So here we go, getting the cordless out, forcing it a bit. There it is, a big forcing a bit, and I'm going to drill a couple of big holes into the side of both sections of this rat. Forcing bits are probably the best because you get that really even sort of cut out of them, and you can just simply use the hand drill to get the angles and everything that you want. I've got a drill press, but not really interested in using it. This is the easiest way. I find it fast, ready to go. There's one on the front end. I'm going to put one in the back end. The idea is put one up near the bib, in the paddle section to really get that moving, and then one in the rear where we'll get that rear wobble, and it'll hopefully will jiggle along pretty well. So just getting these holes put in. Can't really tell you, it's about 100 mil I think, forcing a bit. It's quite a big one, and getting ready and thinking about how I'm going to cap them off with timber to keep it all nice and neat and all timber. So experimenting a bit with what to put inside. I've got a couple of stainless steel bearings there, ball bearings, and I've also got a washer just to hear the different sound. It's a bit of an experiment to put different sounding things inside the lures. No lure can sound exactly the same, just with the density of timber and everything else. I also am sealing the inside of these holes with some really thin super glue. That way it actually hardens up the area and makes a different tone sound again, just with those bearings and also that washer inside. So we can ensure it's nice and hard in there to sort of have the sound of those things bouncing around off it. Water won't breach in there once the lure is sealed anyway. So it's more just to harden up the timber to give it that more rattly sound. Playing around with these things is always fun because, again, not everyone turns out the same, which is always a good thing because you're always throwing something different around. So here I'm getting ready to close up the hole. Made a little plug out of timber. I think it's an old broken pool cue that I've cut a section off that's the right diameter, and I'm just forcing it in there a bit. Got to be pretty careful, make sure that super glue is dried off before you put those ball bearings back in. As you can see, I've got them both in now. Pretty happy with that rattling sound I'm getting out of both those bits. I've got some baking soda in here. Going to mix it in with the super glue really carefully. I've got to make sure that super glue doesn't seep into the chamber, because that will stop your ball bearing and washers from moving around. It'll just glue it in place forever. So it's a little bit risky, although those discs that I did put in were a very tight fit, so I'm pretty confident that they won't breach the internal chamber. And I'll make sure I've got that accelerator there on the bench ready to go. Putting some baking soda over the seals just to weld it all together. I'm using a paintbrush just to clear off some of the extra baking soda. Baking soda is really hard to sand. Once it sets like absolute cement, it's very difficult to sand it off. So I try and get particularly the baking soda out of any detail bits and pieces, because it can make sanding not too much fun at all. Again, the really thin super glue is going on, and that'll harden up within seconds. The baking soda really sucks the moisture out of the super glue and creates this crazy hard bond. Just thinking about the joint now, and thinking about going with a really large mobile joint in this lure, and using a really large screw eye, probably 100 mil internal diameter, to sit on the rear end of the lure to pivot off a pin and make the joint. So I'm just thinking about how that's going to look right now. The rear end is where I'm going to, and you can see I've already channeled out the back end of it, just drilling 3 or 4 holes with my drill and roughing it out. I've also got my really big screw eye that I've put in to the body of the rat, and just cleaning it up a little bit with the Dremel. The Dremel makes light work of the jelly tong as well. It's amazing what some decent Dremel bits can do in a short amount of time. So I want a bit of clearance in there. Also want a bit lateral movement up and down, not just side to side, just so we can get the best flex out of the lure as possible. Cleaning up the joint now, making sure that I've got no burrs that will get stuck or anything like that before we go into the final stages of putting this thing together. I'm going to use a really thick pin to hold everything together, hold the screw eye in on the rear end of the lure. That way it's super strong. I'll glue that in with 2-part epoxy and make sure that it's, you know, sort of 100 mil cod. Won't worry about bending or breaking any of these bits. This is built for cod. Unlike a lot of the bass lures, American bass lures that people are using over here in Australia, if you buy a lure from an Aussie lure maker who works with timber, they certainly customize that lure to make sure it's cod strong, and every bit of hardware that goes into this lure is, you know, as strong as I can possibly make it, so it can step up. I've used this method and tested screw eyes and tested my bits and pieces in the field, but I've also tested it just with trying to pull the hell out of it with pliers and everything else. Getting into some final sanding. Sanding is the bane of my existence most of the time. Hand sanding little sections and parts of the lure just to bring out the subtle details in the timber. It's just part of timber lure working, not the funnest part and not the most exciting thing that can happen when you're lure building. So we'll just skip through a bit of this real quick. And on to putting the actual lure together. You can see I've got that really heavy pin that I've made out of stainless steel. That joint looks good, so it's on to the reference and checking out where I'm going to put the hook hangers and the toe points. Big decision. We don't want the hooks to catch on anything or get tangled up and be easy to cast every time. Where I put these hook hangers can also influence hookup rate, obviously, and even the action from where the toe point is being put. This time I'm going pretty high on the head. The toe point's going to come out of the nose, and some hook hangers, one in the middle and one at the rear. I start with stainless wire. You can see I've made a bend in the wire just with a pair of pliers, and I do it a little bit differently to a fair few of the other people. I actually use some vice grips and a cordless drill with a hook in the end, as you can see, and just twist them up. That way I can apply the right amount of pressure with the drill to get those really nice twists in the wire. Fitting up the hook hangers now, twisting them in just to see how they fit, and seating them just a little bit further into the softer jelly tongue timber. I do drill pilot holes a few millimeters, or a millimeter smaller than the hole. That way it grips onto the timber, but also allows a little bit of room for the glue that we're going to insert in to take hold and really grip onto something. But that's pretty much the finished carving. You can see the eyes are on. They're just 2 pin heads that I've put in eyes, and it's sealer time.
Ready to seal up?
This Norseal 2-part epoxy sealer for marine applications works really well. A lot of people use it. It really penetrates the wood and gives you a really good,
find it pretty good
seal in between the obviously raw timber and the water. Then we'll paint this thing up afterwards and put. I've decided to put on this one a 2-part epoxy clear as well. when working with any epoxy, getting the ratios right, I use these little syringes and just have one dedicated for each tin so there's no sort of cross contamination, and a little cup to mix out the sealer. Does the job pretty easily and gets it done pretty quickly, and most of the time it's pretty accurate, which is great. Any epoxy sealer, there's so many variables that can, or any epoxies that you're using, weather, temperature, humidity, they all come into play. With this wood sealer, it's a little bit different. It's a lot thinner. It penetrates the wood, so drying times do vary in sand times, but I like to leave it for at least 48 hours after doing some of this sealing, just to really let it set before I sand, and then get ready to apply the top coats. As you can see, there's a lot of time and processing that goes on to getting these lures right, particularly being made out of timber. We want a lure to last as long as possible and try and really keep them buoyant for a long period of time. A lot of casting and obviously a lot of hook rash that goes into it. So now just let them sit and we move on to painting. I didn't record any of the painting for this one, but I did go for the Rakali paint scheme. All those browns, different colours of lights into darks. Put a big paddler bib on, and it's ready to go and ready to ship off to Sunny after a little bit of a swim test. So here he is. It's got that usual paddler action, lots of wobble. Really happy with this one. I think it will do the job on some giant and even smaller models. So I think I filled the brief. Now it's time to ship to Sunny. I hope he likes it. I hope you liked the video.